I never imagined that one decision, one arrogant decision, would shatter everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I never imagined that the man I called my husband would take something my mother gifted me with love, pride, and trust, and hand it over to his father as if I didn't matter at all. And I never imagined that my quiet, soft-spoken mother would be the one who delivered the kind of revenge that made my husband tremble like a child. I'm glad you're here, because what I'm about to tell you, it changed the way I see family, loyalty, and myself. So take a breath, settle in, because this story begins in the most unexpected moment. The day everything broke started on an afternoon so ordinary, so painfully normal, that nothing could have prepared me for the storm that was quietly building behind it. I had no idea I was walking straight into the truth, my truth, hidden behind my husband's confident smile and his father's silent expectations. It started with a phone call, not a dramatic one, not one with shouting or tears, just a simple, gentle call from my mother. She said, "Beta, I'm nearby. Come outside. I want to see you for 5 minutes." Her voice was warm, soft as always. There was nothing unusual about it. Nothing to alarm me. Nothing to trigger even a tiny spark of suspicion. But life is cruel in that way. Sometimes the softest moments hide the sharpest turns. I walked down the stairs of our apartment building, expecting nothing, only to find my mother standing beside the empty parking spot where my car should have been. She looked confused, not angry, not upset, just confused. She held her purse in both hands like she always did, her eyes scanning the concrete ground, then the street, then me. And then she asked the question that would split my entire world open. "Why are you walking? Where is the car I gifted you?" My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I thought maybe she was joking. Maybe she had parked somewhere else. Maybe. But no. She was looking directly at me, waiting for an answer I didn't have. I froze, because in that single, brutally honest moment, I knew something was wrong. Deeply, undeniably wrong. The car wasn't inside the building. It wasn't outside. It wasn't at the mechanic. And I hadn't touched it in days, not because I didn't want to, but because my husband had taken the keys 2 days ago, saying something vague about cleaning it, or getting it checked, or whatever excuse he had mumbled while rushing out the door. But now everything clicked. Every odd moment, every deflection, every sudden quick smile he used to end a conversation. My mother's question cracked open the silence I'd been living inside without even realizing. I swallowed hard and whispered, "Mom, I don't know." She tilted her head slightly, brows knitting together. "Did you give it to someone? Are you getting it serviced? Why didn't you tell me?" And I wanted to answer her, God, I wanted to explain something, anything, but all I had were empty hands and a hollow chest. Then the sound of footsteps behind me made my stomach twist. It was him, my husband. He walked down casually, phone in hand, confidence in every step he took. No guilt, no hesitation, no shame. He approached us, looked at my mother, then at me, and simply said, "Oh, the car. I gave it to my father. He deserves it more." Just like that, as if he had the right, as if it was normal, as if my mother's gift, my mother's sacrifice, was just transferable. My mother's face changed so quickly I almost missed it. Her smile appeared slowly, gracefully, like a curtain rising on a stage. Not angry, not loud, just calm, too calm. The kind of calm only a dangerous person carries. She looked at him for a long second, that soft little smile still on her lips, and simply said, "Okay." And that okay was the beginning of the end. Because behind that tiny smile was something my husband did not see. Something he could not imagine. Something he would never forget. My mother turned to me, touched my cheek gently, and said, "Beta, come with me. I need to talk to you." And then she walked toward her car, completely ignoring my husband, who was still standing there with that smug arrogance dripping off him. He thought he had won. He thought he had done something clever, something bold, something that made him look like a dutiful son in front of his family. But he had no idea what he had triggered inside my mother. He had no idea how deep her love ran, or how sharp her silence could become. I followed her, confused, tense, my thoughts running in 100 directions. We sat in her car, and she didn't speak at first. She just stayed straight ahead, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Then she said a sentence that made my heart drop to my feet. "Don't worry about the car. Worry about the man who thought he could take what's yours." Her voice trembled slightly, just slightly, but that tremble held years of suppressed disappointment, years of watching me struggle in ways I tried hiding from her. I whispered, "Mum, I don't understand why he did it." She turned to look at me. Her eyes weren't angry. They were deeply, painfully sad. "Beta, he didn't do it for his father. He did it because he thinks he owns you." That's when something inside me cracked open. Not rage, not hatred, not even hurt. It was the sudden, raw realization that I had been ignoring signs for months, maybe years, signs that led to this moment, signs that made this betrayal possible, signs that whispered, slowly and quietly, that my marriage was not what I thought it was. My mother placed her hand on mine and said softly, "I'm going to fix this, not for the car, for you." And I believed her. But I had no idea what she meant, no idea how far she would go, no idea how powerful a mother's love could be when pushed into a corner. All I knew was that something had shifted, something irreversible. The woman sitting beside me was not just my mother anymore. She was a storm preparing to break open. And my husband, my arrogant husband, had no idea it was heading straight for him. Her smile earlier wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't surrender. It was a warning he completely missed. As we drove away, I looked back at him standing in the parking lot, still checking his phone, still smirking, still unaware that his world had started collapsing the moment he opened his mouth. That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment the truth began to unravel. That was the moment my story truly started. And I didn't even know how much more I would lose, or how much stronger I would become. But this was only the beginning. Before everything fell apart, my life seemed simple in the kind of way you don't question until it breaks. It wasn't perfect, but it was familiar, predictable, soft around the edges. Sometimes I think back to that version of myself, the woman who believed that consistency meant safety, and I almost feel I used to think it was maturity. Later, I realized it was entitlement. But in those days, I tried not to overanalyze things. I tried to believe that marriage was a gentle compromise, not a battlefield. My mother had taught me to make peace, to create harmony, to avoid unnecessary conflict. So I followed that. I built a small, steady life around habits that felt safe. Our apartment was modest but warm. Not fancy, not luxurious, but enough for two people building their future. I had chosen the curtains, the soft beige ones that allowed the afternoon sunlight to spill across the living room in a golden wash. I picked the carpets, the cushions, the little frames with pictures from our early dating days. Looking back, I realized almost everything in that home was chosen by me. He didn't really care. He would shrug and say, "Whatever you want is fine." I used to feel lucky to have a partner who wasn't controlling or picky. But later, I understood that indifference is simply another kind of carelessness. Still, at that time, I filled the silence with meaning because I wanted to. Because I loved him. Because his small gestures, the ones that seemed sweet back then, fooled me into thinking we were building something real. Ian had a way of smiling that made me forget every worry. A slightly crooked grin, a playful tilt of the head, eyes that sparkled with mischief. He wasn't traditionally handsome, but he carried himself like someone who expected the world to bend around him. That confidence was intoxicating in the beginning. I thought it meant he was strong. I thought it meant he would protect me, stand by me, carry challenges with me. Instead, I later learned it meant he would expect me to carry everything, including the consequences of his actions. But this was before the cracks appeared, and I still believed in him. I worked from home back then, freelance content writing, and my days were quiet. I liked the comfort of my small desk by the window. I liked hearing the distant sounds of life outside, school buses, street vendors, children laughing, motorcycles passing by. Ian worked in sales. He came and went with a rhythm that rarely aligned with mine. Some days he was home early, cheerful, energetic, telling me about new clients and commissions. Other days he was distant, tired, irritated by something he never explained. But he was never cruel. Not in the obvious ways. He didn't shout. He didn't insult. He didn't raise his hand. His weapon was subtler, dismissiveness, avoidance, small decisions made without involving me, choices that slowly erased my place in the home we shared. Back then, I didn't see these moments as warnings. I brushed them aside, chalked them up to stress, work pressure, personality differences. It's easy to ignore small cracks when you want the walls to stay standing. And God, I wanted them to stand. When my mother gifted me the car, her old white sedan, I cried. Not because I needed a car, but because of what it meant. She had saved for years. She had driven that car with pride, taken it for routine maintenance, handled it like part of the family. When she bought herself a new one, she handed me the keys with such joy, as if giving me a piece of her own independence. I remember hugging her in the driveway. She whispered, "Now you won't have to depend on anyone. You can move freely." At the time, I didn't grasp the deeper meaning of her words. I just thought she was being thoughtful. But she knew something back then, something I wasn't ready to see. I felt like a child receiving her first bicycle. I took pictures of the car from every angle, cleaned it twice a week, placed a small jasmine-scented freshener inside. It wasn't new, but it was mine. And despite his flaws, Ian seemed happy about it. Or at least, he pretended well. He said things like, "Now you won't have to wait for me when you want to go somewhere, or this will be easier for your wife." But there were moments, tiny ones, where he looked at the car a little longer than necessary. Moments where his father commented things like, "Your wife is lucky. Women get everything easily," or "Your family really supports her, HM." I didn't think anything of it. Why would I? These were casual remarks, nothing more, or so I believed. But those were not harmless comments. They were seeds. Seeds planted in the mind of someone who didn't like seeing me own something he couldn't control. In our early months of marriage, Ian had a habit of taking things without asking. It was small at first: my charger, my hairdryer, my laptop cable, a scarf, a bottle of perfume. I laughed it off. I teased him. "It's okay, you can use it." "It's fine, I don't mind." "You're so silly, at least tell me before taking it." But inside, I sometimes felt a little uneasy. Not because he borrowed things, but because he took them so casually, so confidently, as if they naturally belonged to him. Once, he misplaced a piece of jewelry my mother gifted me, small gold studs. He had taken them out of my drawer for safekeeping, he said. He lost them the same day. I cried, quietly, in the bathroom. He apologized, but so effortlessly, as if losing someone else's sentiment wasn't a big deal. "It's just jewelry," he said. "We'll buy a new pair." But it wasn't just jewelry. It was a memory. Still, I forgave him, because I thought love meant forgiving small things. Because I thought he didn't mean any harm. Because I thought marriages weren't perfect and people made mistakes. Now I know better. Now I know every dismissal, every careless action, every "it's not a big deal" was another small tear in the fabric of our relationship. But back then, everything seemed manageable. I kept telling myself I was overthinking, that I needed to relax, adjust, compromise. Isn't that what society tells women? Be understanding, be patient, be quiet, keep peace. So I kept peace. When he forgot important dates, I ignored it. When he overspent, I adjusted. When he borrowed money from me just for a week and took 3 months to return it, I justified it. When he prioritized his family's needs over mine, I smoothed it over in my mind with excuses. He is stressed. They need him. It's not that serious. It's okay. I don't need much. I look back and want to shake that woman by her shoulders. But at that time, I thought I was being mature. I thought maturity meant swallowing disappointment with grace. One of the earliest cracks, now so obvious in hindsight, happened 6 months before the car incident. His father had asked him for money. Ian didn't ask me, didn't discuss it, just transferred half of our savings to him. When I found out, I wasn't angry, I was confused. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. He smiled, always that smile, and said, "You're too emotional about money. You worry too much. It's my responsibility." My responsibility. Not ours. Not shared. Not mutual. I didn't argue. I didn't want to fight. I convinced myself that maybe he was right. Maybe marriage didn't need to be perfectly balanced. But there was something else I noticed that day. The pride on his father's face when we visited later. He never said thank you. Never acknowledged it. And strangely, Ian didn't expect gratitude either. He acted as if giving our savings away made him more of a man. That day, I felt a tiny... My mother had seen these shifts long before I did. Sometimes she would look at me with quiet concern when I spoke about Ian's decisions. She never said anything harsh. My mother wasn't the type to interfere, but I could feel her noticing things I desperately tried to hide. "Are you okay?" she would ask. And I would lie. Every time. Of course, everything's fine. I didn't want her to worry. I didn't want to admit that something felt off. I didn't want to accept the possibility that I had married someone who didn't value me the way I valued him. So I kept pretending. Life before the storm wasn't dramatic. It wasn't violent. It wasn't explosive. It was subtle, quiet, invisible to anyone who wasn't looking closely. Ian wasn't a monster. He was worse, a man who didn't realize, or didn't care, that his choices were slowly erasing me. I had no way of knowing then that the small signs I ignored would one day grow into something that shattered everything. But those early cracks were there, right in front of me, waiting. The first real disturbance, the one I couldn't explain away, came quietly. Not with a fight, not with a dramatic moment, but with a feeling. A small, persistent uneasiness that settled in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. It began with something simple. Ian started leaving the house earlier than usual. Not by much. Maybe 30 minutes. Maybe 40. Sometimes an hour. But it wasn't the timing that bothered me. It was the way he did it. No goodbye kiss. No casual "I'll be back early today." No update on meetings or clients. Just a rushed movement. Keys in hand. Phone pressed to his ear, barely looking at me as he muttered, "I'm going." Then the door would click behind him, and I'd be left staring at the empty hallway. At first, I didn't think too much of it. People change their routines. Work fluctuates. Schedules shift. But the uneasiness grew when those early departures became irregular. Some days he left extremely early. Other days he lingered around the house, oddly restless, checking his phone every few minutes like he was waiting for an invisible signal. I started noticing things without meaning to. Like how he would step away to answer calls, or how he angled his phone screen away from me, even though he had never cared before, or how he suddenly kept his phone on silent, face down on the table. Little things, barely noticeable, but they added up. And once you notice one strange thing, you start seeing all the others. Around this time, Ian began visiting his parents more frequently. Again, nothing unusual on the surface. He was close to his family. They lived only 15 minutes away, and we visited them often. But something felt different now. Before, he would tell me when he was going, ask me if I wanted to join, share small conversations afterward. Now he simply disappeared. No explanation, no invitation, sometimes no call. He would come home late, smelling faintly of cigarette smoke, even though he didn't smoke, and he would say things like, "My father needed help. My mother wasn't feeling well. I had to drop something off." Not excuses, not lies, necessarily, just vague enough to give me nothing to question while giving him everything he needed to hide behind. And each time he returned home, something inside him shifted. He wasn't angry. He wasn't tired. He wasn't distant in the traditional sense. He was heavier, as if carrying an invisible burden he refused to share. I noticed it most in the way he touched me. Before, he would greet me with a hand on my shoulder, fingers brushing mine, a small gesture of connection. Now, He barely looked at me, as if he was thinking too much, or hiding too much. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I didn't want to accuse him of anything without understanding what was happening. So I waited, quietly, watching, collecting pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I was building. The real shift came one evening, a late-night moment so small I could have ignored it if I wasn't already on edge. He thought I was asleep, but I wasn't. I was lying on my side, facing the wall, half drifting in and out of sleep when I felt him get out of bed. Not gently, not quietly, just a sudden movement, like he was startled by something. I kept still. He grabbed his phone from the dresser and tiptoed to the hallway. He closed the bedroom door behind him, not fully, but enough to drown out his voice. Still, I heard the low hum of conversation. Fast, tense, not the way he spoke with his friends, not the way he spoke to his colleagues. This was different. I heard one word clearly through the half-closed door, tomorrow. Then another, don't worry. Then silence. When he came back inside, he thought he was being quiet, but I could hear his breathing, shaky, uneven, like he had run a long distance. He slipped into bed next to me and turned away, facing the opposite direction. And for the first time since we married, I felt like a stranger was sleeping beside me. The following morning, I expected him to act normal, pretend nothing had happened, fall back into his usual routine. Instead, he was nervous, not openly, not dramatically, but in small, telling ways. He kept checking the time, kept pacing, kept touching the car keys on the counter, twirling them, putting them down, picking them up again. That little metal keychain suddenly felt like a symbol in the room, a sign. Then he said something that stuck with me. I'll take your car today. Mine is low on fuel. He didn't ask. He just announced it. I blinked, confused. He rarely used my car. He preferred his own. But before I could respond, he added, I'll fill the tank later. There was a strange emphasis on later, so subtle it could have been accidental. But nothing felt accidental anymore. Still, I didn't argue. I just nodded. What else was I supposed to do? Tell him I overheard his midnight call? Admit I was suspicious without evidence? I handed him the keys. He kissed my forehead in a hurried, distracted way, and then he left. The sound of the car engine starting outside made my stomach twist. There was something wrong. I couldn't name it yet, but I felt it like a shadow standing in the doorway. Hours passed. Slowly, painfully slowly. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't respond to my message asking when he would return. By noon, my uneasiness shifted into fear. By afternoon, into confusion. By evening, into a heavy, suffocating silence. The car was gone. He was gone. I kept pacing around the living room, checking my phone every few minutes, hoping to see his name appear on the screen. Nothing. Just emptiness. Around sunset, I walked out to the building entrance, unable to stay inside any longer. I kept scanning the road, the parking area, the sidewalk, anything to ground myself. And then, as I stood there, someone approached me. A neighbor, older woman, sweet, talkative. She asked casually, "Was that your husband leaving with your car this morning?" I nodded. She smiled, unaware of the knot in my stomach. I saw him with his father, and now, this. It didn't make sense. Not fully, not clearly, but I could feel it. A truth forming in the background. A disloyalty I could almost see but not grasp yet. I thanked the neighbor and went inside quietly, my heartbeat echoing through my ears. And when he finally came home, hours after dark, smelling faintly of sweat and cigarette smoke, he acted as if everything was normal. As if taking my car for an entire day, disappearing with his father, and ignoring me was an ordinary Wednesday. He placed the keys on the dining table and said, "You should rest. I'm tired." That was it. No explanation. No apology. Nothing. But now the seed had sprouted. The first real clue. The first undeniable sign that something was happening behind my back. Something that involved him. Something that involved his father. Something that involved my car. Something that involved decisions made without me, about me. And the thing about small discoveries is they never stay small. Once they appear, they grow. Quietly, insistently, until they become something you can no longer ignore. The real unraveling began the following week. Slow, quiet, and cruel in the way only truth can be. It didn't arrive in a single explosive moment. It arrived in fragments, pieces, hints, and each piece cut deeper than the last. I didn't go looking for answers at first. I didn't snoop through his messages or follow him or interrogate anyone. No, the truth found me. It has a way of doing that when it's tired of being hidden. Everything started with the car. After the day he vanished with it alongside his father, the car stopped feeling like mine. It felt like a shared secret between two people who weren't me. A symbol of something shifting behind my back. I began using it more often, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. Almost as if he was testing boundaries he expected me not to question. Each day when he left for work, he took it. And each evening when he returned, the fuel gauge was lower, the mileage higher, and the smell different. Not his cologne, not his deodorant. A faint scent of biryani, cigarette smoke, and an old shisha lounge. A scent his father carried. The realization crept over me gradually. The car wasn't being used for work. It was being used for his father's errands, his father's outings, his father's convenience. One morning, I asked gently, "Are you using the car for your parents these days?" He didn't look at me, didn't pause, didn't even pretend to think. He just said one word, sometimes. A lie that landed too easily. A lie spoken with the confidence of someone who didn't fear consequences. But lies always leave fingerprints if you look closely. The first undeniable clue came unexpectedly. I had an appointment one afternoon, an important meeting for a freelance project. I needed the car. Ian was at work, and his workplace was close by, so I called him and said, "I need the car for an hour. Can I pick it up from your office?" There was a stretch of silence on the line, longer than it should have been. Heavy, uncomfortable. Then he said, "I didn't bring it today." But his tone, it was too quick, too rigid, too defensive. Before I could respond, he added, "I took a ride with a colleague. The car is at home." But it wasn't. I checked the parking lot. The space was empty. The car wasn't at his office. The car wasn't at home. The car wasn't anywhere near me. And something inside me snapped, not anger, not rage, just a sharp, clear awareness. He was lying, boldly, carelessly, repeatedly. And lies, once they start, don't stop on their own. My next clue came without warning. Later that day, when he returned home, his father was with him. I saw them from the balcony, laughing, talking, walking with a swagger, as if celebrating something. And parked beside them, exactly where the car used to sit, was my white sedan. His father stepped out of the passenger seat. My heart sank, not because the car was there, but because of how familiar the movements were. How smoothly he closed the door. How casually he patted the hood. How naturally he walked around it, as if he had done it a dozen times. Ian didn't look up to see if I was watching. He didn't care. He simply tossed the keys to his father with a playful grin and said, "Keep it for today. Keep it. Not borrow it. Not use it. Not take it for an hour. Keep it." That word stayed lodged in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. What was happening behind my back? When did my things stop being mine? When did decisions happen without me, even when they involved me? I felt small that evening, smaller than I had ever felt in my life. A few days later, I found the next clue, this time inside the car itself. Ian had left it at home while he went with a friend. I needed groceries, so I grabbed the keys and headed downstairs. When I opened the door of the car, something felt wrong. Tiny details I wouldn't have noticed before. The seat was pushed far back, not in the way Ian adjusted it, but in the posture of a much older driver. The mirror was angled downward. A faint smell of pond lingered. And in the glove compartment, tucked beside the manual, was something that didn't belong. A prescription. Not in Ian's name. Not in mine. It had his father's name. My chest tightened. Why was his father's prescription inside my car? Why was he driving it often enough to keep personal items inside it? Why wasn't I told anything? I held the paper in my hand, staring at the dates, the dosage, the doctor's stamp. And it hit me. This car, the one my mother gifted me with so much love, was being used as a family vehicle for his parents. Not for emergencies, not out of necessity, but for convenience, for pride, for ease. Ian had made a silent decision. His family's needs came before mine, before my independence, before my ownership. I put the prescription back, closed the glove compartment, and sat there quietly for a long time. The air felt thick. My lungs felt tight. This wasn't about the car anymore. This was about control, about disrespect, about invisibility. And for the first time, I began to wonder what else he was deciding without me. The next discovery came in the form of a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. One afternoon, as I walked into the living room, I heard his voice from the balcony. He was standing outside, talking on the phone, laughing lightly. I paused, not intentionally to eavesdrop, but because something in his tone felt off. He said, "I told her the car needed checking. She didn't ask anything." My stomach twisted. Then he added, "No, she won't say anything. She's not like that." As if not questioning him was a trait he prided himself on. As if my silence was his advantage. Then came the line that made my knees weaken. "Baba likes the car. Let him use it. What difference does it make? It's all the same." All the same. I felt the words hit like a slap. My things, my boundaries, my identity. Ian came home unusually cheerful. He placed the car keys on the table and said, "My father took the car for a long drive today." He said it casually, as if talking about the weather. I froze. "A long drive." I repeated. He shrugged. He wanted to go see the new farmhouse construction. I didn't need the car. I stared at him, at his relaxed posture, at the way he dismissed something so deeply personal with a single sentence. His father took the car on a leisure trip. A gift from my mother. Something I cherished. Without asking me. Without telling me. Without caring. And Ian supported it. Encouraged it. Enabled it. Something inside me sank, not like a weight, but like a realization folding into my bones. I didn't matter. My things didn't matter. My boundaries didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. Not to him. Not to his father. Not to his family. And I had allowed this feeling to grow in silence, hoping things would improve, believing these were small issues. But nothing was small anymore. Every little disrespect had grown into something heavy and undeniable. And now, it wasn't just about the car. It was about what the car represented. My mother's love. My independence. My dignity. My voice. Things they had taken without hesitation. Things they never intended to retain. There's a strange moment in every story where pain quietly transforms into clarity. It doesn't happen suddenly, not with lightning or an explosion, but with a stillness so sharp it cuts deeper than anger ever could. For me, that moment came late at night. It was after the day Ian casually told me his father took my car on a long drive. He said it like someone describing a grocery run, without guilt or hesitation. Then he went to sleep peacefully, leaving me standing alone in the living room with a silence so heavy I could barely breathe. I didn't cry that night. Not the way I had cried before, soft tears hidden in bathrooms, whispered frustration pressed into pillows. This time, there was no shaking voice, no aching throat. Just stillness, a quiet, chilling stillness that settled inside me like something permanent. I stood near the window, watching the distant city lights flicker quietly, and I realized something. Pain wasn't the problem anymore. Expectations were. I had expected him to care. Expected him to protect the things that mattered to me. Expected him to treat me like a partner, not a background figure. Expected him to think before taking. Expected him to choose us over convenience. Every expectation had led to disappointment, and disappointment had led to silence. But silence had now turned into clarity. I couldn't keep waiting for him to become someone he never planned to be. I couldn't keep rationalizing his behavior. I couldn't keep allowing myself to be erased in my own home. Standing at that window, I felt something shift inside me, something small but powerful. I was done shrinking, done smoothing over wrongs, done excusing carelessness, done letting myself be pushed into the corners of my own life. I didn't know what I would do yet, but I knew I had crossed a line within myself. And once you cross that line, there is no returning. The next morning, I woke up with a strange calmness. Not happiness, not relief, just clarity. Ian was in a rush, getting ready for work, picking up his things without looking at me. He grabbed the car keys from the dresser and said, "I'm taking your car again." He didn't ask. He didn't wait. He didn't care. He walked toward the door with the same entitlement he had been carrying for weeks. But this time, something inside me refused to stay silent. Without planning it, without rehearsing it, I said quietly, "No." He didn't hear me at first. Or maybe he didn't expect me to object. He turned slightly. "What?" I took a slow breath, the kind you take right before stepping into something irreversible. "I said no," I repeated. "You're not taking the car today." He stared at me, shocked, as if I had spoken in a language he didn't understand. Then confusion turned into irritation, the familiar flicker of arrogance returning to his eyes. "What do you mean no?" he asked, half laughing. "I need it." "I also need it," I replied. "And it's mine." The words came out steady, not loud, not angry, just steady. He narrowed his eyes slightly. "Why are you creating drama?" "I'm just using the car." "That's the problem," I said. "You're using something that isn't yours, without asking, without respecting me, and without explaining anything." He scoffed. "It's just a car." "No," I said. "It's not just a car. It's a boundary, and you've crossed it too many times." He looked genuinely confused now, as if the concept of me having boundaries was an unfamiliar idea. "What's wrong with you?" he muttered. "You're acting different lately." I wanted to say, "No, I'm acting exactly how I should have from the beginning." But I didn't. Instead, I looked him directly in the eyes and said, "If you want to take the car, talk to me. Don't assume. Don't decide for me." For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he shook his head, mumbled something under his breath, grabbed his own bike keys, and left. I stood there for a long moment after the door closed. My hands were trembling. My heart was pounding. But inside, something felt new. Not victory, not revenge. Control. A small piece of myself returning. The next few days felt different. Ian didn't take the car, not because he respected my words, but because he was annoyed I had challenged him. He didn't say it, but his silence was sharp enough to communicate it. He came home later than usual. He barely spoke. His father called him more often. I could hear their conversations drifting from the hallway, agitated, frustrated, laced with entitlement. Lines like, "It's just a car." "She's overreacting." "Why can't she be more flexible?" "You're letting small things create issues." Every word felt like a tiny blade, not because they discussed my car, but because they discussed me like an object to be corrected. But for the first time in months, I didn't shrink. The quiet inside me had become stronger than their noise. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I wasn't planning anything dramatic. I was observing, understanding, letting the truth settle fully. Because clarity sharpens slowly, but it sharpens completely. The real turning point, the one that pushed me from quiet resolve into action, came unexpectedly from my mother. A week after my small confrontation with Ian, she invited me over for tea. Her tone was soft, but her words carried weight. "I've been thinking," she said, pouring tea into delicate cups she only used for guests. "You've been quieter than usual." I sighed. "I'm handling it." "I know you are," she said gently, "but handling something isn't the same as fixing it." I looked at her, confused. She smiled, sadly, knowingly. "You're trying to make peace with something that isn't peaceful," she continued. "And that's why you're tired." Her words pierced something. Then she placed her hand over mine, her touch warm and steady. "I can help you," she said. "Not to fight, not to break your marriage, but to protect your dignity. I stared at her, heart pounding. What do you mean? I whispered. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. Inside was paperwork I didn't recognize at first. Legal-looking papers, official stamps, receipts, transfer documents. My eyes widened as I realized what I was seeing. The car wasn't just a gift. It was officially registered in my name, fully. No shared ownership. No loopholes. No joint rights. Your name is the only one that matters here, she said quietly. No one, not even your husband, has a right over it, legally or morally. I felt a rush of emotions, relief, validation, sorrow, strength, all tangled into one overwhelming wave. I didn't want to interfere before, she continued, but after seeing how things have been, I want you to know you're not alone. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her words sink in. She squeezed my hand gently. You can let them take your things, she said, or you can take back your power. Something inside me clicked. Not anger, not revenge. Resolve. Clear, sharp resolve. Because for the first time, I understood something I had been too afraid to face. I wasn't fighting for a car. I was fighting for my dignity, my autonomy, my place in my own life. And once a woman realizes her worth, there is no force, no husband, no father-in-law, no arrogant entitlement that can silence her again. I closed the folder slowly, carefully, as if sealing an understanding between who I had been and who I was becoming. And in that quiet room, with my mother watching me patiently, I knew what I had to do. I didn't know the exact plan yet. I didn't know the steps or the timing, but I knew the direction. I wouldn't let anyone steal my independence again. Not loudly, not with chaos, not with screaming, but with calm, calculated action. A storm was forming inside me, not wild and uncontrolled like before, but deliberate, focused, and precise. And anyone who had underestimated me, anyone who thought I was weak, anyone who believed I would stay silent forever, was about to learn who I truly was. The day everything finally snapped into action came without warning. No dramatic thunder, no cinematic soundtrack, just a quiet morning, the kind that pretends to be ordinary. I woke up before iron. The sky outside was pale, soft, silent, but inside me, a storm was preparing to move. I had spent days thinking, analyzing, observing, not reacting emotionally, but mentally stepping back and watching the situation like a puzzle that had been scrambled by someone else's hands. Every disrespect, every lie, every assumption he made, every boundary he ignored, all of it aligned now. And I knew exactly what needed to be done. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to accuse. I didn't need to create a scene. I just needed one thing, to take back control. Quietly, decisively, completely. The opportunity arrived the moment Ian opened his eyes that morning. He sat up lazily, yawning, checking his phone with that half-bored expression he wore whenever he had nothing better to do. Then he reached for the car keys on the bedside table. I watched his hand hover over them like it always did, thoughtless, entitled, automatic. Before he touched them, I said, "You won't need those." He paused. His fingers stopped midair. Slowly, he turned his head and looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. I met his eyes. Steady, calm, unflinching. "I took the car," I said. "It's not here." He blinked. Twice. 3 times. "What?" "It's with me," I repeated, my voice steady. "And it won't be used without my permission anymore." His confusion turned into disbelief. "What drama is this?" he muttered. "Why are you making things complicated?" "I'm clarifying things," I replied. "You don't get to make decisions about my belongings. Not anymore." His eyes narrowed. He swung his legs off the bed, irritation rising like heat from asphalt. "It's just a car," he snapped. "No," I said. "It's respect." A silence stretched between us, thick, heavy, sharp. Then he stood up, his voice rising. "You're overreacting. My father needed it. And he should have asked me." I snapped back, not loudly, not violently, but with a conviction that felt like steel. "He's my father," he shouted. "And I'm your wife," I said softly. That shut him up. He stared at me, stunned by the simplicity of the truth he had ignored for so long. But he wasn't ready to accept defeat. Not yet. Not him. He scoffed, grabbed his phone, and stormed toward the living room. I followed him slowly, calmly, almost silently. He dialed his father. I listened as the conversation unfolded in front of me like the inevitable peak of a rising fire. "Baba," he said angrily. "She took the car. She's saying it's hers." He paused, listening. Then he clenched his jaw. "She's saying you need her permission." Another pause. "Of course she's wrong. Why does she suddenly think she owns everything?" I stepped closer. My voice was cold when I said, "Put it on speaker." He spun toward me, shocked. "What?" "Put it on speaker," I said again. "Let him hear me." Ian hesitated, his arrogance colliding violently with the new version of me he didn't know how to handle. But he obeyed. A sudden, piercing sound that chopped the moment in half. He frowned. "Who the hell is that?" I already knew. I had been waiting. I walked to the door calmly and opened it. My mother stood there, in her simple clothes, with her calm demeanor, with her silent strength. She looked at me first, then at Ian. She stepped inside. Ian exhaled sharply. "Oh God," he muttered. "Great timing." My mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't glare. She didn't confront. She simply placed a sealed envelope on the table. Ian stayed at it. I stayed at him. "What's that?" he asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. My mother looked him straight in the eyes. "It's a notice," she said quietly. "Since you and your father seem confused about ownership." He stiffened. "A notice for what?" Her voice was calm, deadly calm. "For unauthorized use of a vehicle registered under my daughter's name." He blinked. His mouth fell open slightly. "What?" She continued. "You had no legal right to take it. Your father had no legal right to use it. And any future attempt to do so will be considered misuse of property." Ian stayed, speechless for the first time since I met him. Then she added one last sentence. "And if my daughter wants, she can file a police report." Silence crashed into the room like thunder. Ian's face paled. His arrogance collapsed. His confidence evaporated. He looked between me and my mother, shaken. "You called your mother for this?" he asked, voice cracking slightly. "No," I said firmly. "She came because she saw what I refused to see." He swallowed hard. "What exactly do you want from me?" I stepped closer. "I want accountability." He blinked. "For what?" he whispered. "For every time you disrespected me. For every decision you made without me. For every boundary you crossed. For every lie. For every entitlement. For every way you made me smaller." His breaths grew uneven. "And for the last time," I said, "you don't get to touch my car. Ever again." He lowered his eyes. "And for the first time since our marriage began." Ian looked afraid. Not of me, but of consequences. Real consequences. Consequences he had never thought he'd face. The hours after the confrontation felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. Almost unreal. Ian didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't lash out. He simply sat there, stunned, deflated, shrunken in a way I had never seen before. The arrogance that once filled every inch of his body had drained out of him. His shoulders fell forward. His breathing slowed. His eyes didn't know where to look. I should have felt satisfied, maybe even triumphant. But what I felt instead was exhaustion. A long, bone-deep exhaustion that made me sit down slowly on the sofa, like someone who had finally put down a weight she'd been carrying for years. My mother stayed a few minutes longer, watching both of us with an expression I couldn't fully read. Part concern, part resolve, part something else entirely. She placed her hand on mine briefly, giving it a gentle squeeze. No words. She didn't need any. Then she left. When the door closed behind her, the silence became heavier. It wasn't the sharp silence of anger or tension. It was the hollow silence left behind after a storm has ripped through a room. Ian finally spoke. I didn't know it meant that much to you, he said quietly. I didn't answer. Not because I was ignoring him, but because I genuinely didn't know where to start. How do you explain to someone that it wasn't about a car? That it was never about a vehicle, or a set of keys, or borrowed errands? How do you explain that the Betrayal wound came from being treated like an afterthought for so long that you forgot what respect felt like? He shifted in his seat, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. I wasn't trying to hurt you, he said again, softer this time. I closed my eyes for a moment. Maybe he wasn't trying, but he did, over and over. Not in one dramatic blow, but in 1,000 small cuts that left bruises no one could see but me. When I finally spoke, my voice came out tired, not angry. You didn't think you were hurting me because you never thought about me at all. He flinched at that, not visibly, but in the small tightening around his eyes. I looked at him steadily. 4 months, you made decisions without me. You crossed boundaries without thinking. You took what was mine and treated it like it was yours to distribute. Not because you're evil, but because you assumed I wouldn't mind. He swallowed hard. But I thought. You thought wrong, I said, and you never paused long enough to notice. The silence returned, this time softer, almost delicate. Ian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, rubbing his forehead. I don't know why I acted like that, he whispered. I thought I was helping, or doing the right thing, or doing what a son should do. I took a slow breath. It wasn't easy watching him unravel. Not because I pitied him, but because this was the first time, maybe ever, that he was seeing himself clearly. A son, I repeated quietly. But what about being a husband? He didn't answer, because he didn't have an answer. He had assumed those roles were separate, that he could fulfill one while neglecting the other. He never realized they were connected by the same thread, respect. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. The sky outside had shifted into late afternoon light, soft, muted, calm. I'm not here to punish you, I said. I'm tired of being hurt. I'm tired of being quiet. I'm tired of feeling invisible. Ian turned his face toward me. Tell me what to do, he said, his voice small, uncertain. The truth was, I didn't know. I didn't have a perfect plan. I didn't know if our marriage could go back to what it was, or if it even should. But for the first time, I knew what I needed for myself. I need space, I said softly. I need to breathe without checking your reactions. I need to think without waiting for your approval. I need to remember who I am when I'm not trying to hold everything together alone. He nodded slowly, not happily, not easily, but he nodded. Okay, he whispered. I'll give you space. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't shift the blame onto me like he used to. He simply accepted it. And acceptance, I realized, was the first genuine step he had taken in months. The next few days passed differently. Ian stopped touching the car keys, stopped making decisions without asking, stopped disappearing with vague excuses. There was an awkwardness between us, a fragile, shaky awkwardness, like walking across thin ice. But beneath that awkwardness lay something I hadn't seen in a long time. Effort. He didn't transform overnight. People don't. Arrogance doesn't vanish in a single confrontation. Habits don't break because someone finally said no. But he was trying. He asked before borrowing anything. He double-checked before making plans. He listened instead of dismissing. Small things, tiny adjustments, barely noticeable on the outside, but noticeable to me. The atmosphere in our home shifted gradually. Stillness replaced tension, caution replaced entitlement. Not perfect, not healed, but quieter, softer, like the dust settling after an earthquake. One evening, Ian came home holding something in his hand, a small envelope. He placed it on the table. I want you to open it, he said. I hesitated but opened it carefully. Inside was a set of documents. I recognized them immediately, vehicle papers, transfer forms, but this time they were different. Every line was signed, every field filled, every stamp complete. Ian cleared his throat nervously. I transferred the insurance into your name too, he said softly. I didn't realize they had it under my number. It's all yours now. Everything. I didn't speak right away. Not because I didn't appreciate it, but because the gesture meant more than paperwork. It meant acknowledgement. It meant accountability. It meant a man who had taken without thinking was finally learning how to give with intention. He looked at me quietly. You deserved this a long time ago. I nodded, still processing the moment. Without theatrics, without drama, without shouting, a balance had begun to shift, subtle, cautious, imperfect, but real. It took time for me to speak about what truly hurt me. Not the car, not the lies, but the months of feeling small. When I finally told him, all of it, Ian didn't interrupt, didn't defend, didn't dismiss. He just listened. His eyes lowered, his face tight with realization, regret, or maybe both. I didn't know I was becoming that kind of man, he said quietly. Neither did I replied. And that's why it hurt so much. Healing wasn't quick, wasn't easy, wasn't dramatic. It was slow, uncomfortable, honest. We had uncomfortable conversations. We revisited old mistakes. We clarified boundaries. We built new habits. Some days felt like progress. Other days felt like stepping backward. But for the first time, I wasn't carrying everything alone. For the first time, he was meeting me halfway. One night, weeks later, as we sat quietly on the balcony watching the street lights flicker below, Ian spoke softly. You were right, he said. I treated you like you'd always accept whatever I did. I took advantage of your silence, not your kindness. I didn't reply. He continued, voice tight with humility. It won't go back to the way it was, but I want it to become better than it ever was. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who wasn't just apologizing. He was transforming, not because of fear, not because my mother confronted him, not because of legal papers, but because he finally saw what he had become and who he didn't want to be. I wasn't naive. I didn't believe in sudden perfection, but I did believe in growth, in effort, in reflection. And for the first time in a long time, our future didn't look like a burden. It looked like a possibility. When I look back on everything now, the silence, the disrespect, the slow erosion of my confidence, it doesn't feel like a single story. It feels like a lifetime I had lived without realizing I was slowly disappearing inside it. Not because I was weak, not because I lacked courage, but because I kept giving pieces of myself away in the name of love, peace, and patience, until there wasn't much left to give. And the truth I learned is simple, but heavy. You cannot build a healthy relationship on silence. You cannot build respect by shrinking yourself. And you cannot protect your marriage by sacrificing your dignity. Those things don't create peace. They create permission. Permission for someone to take more. Permission for someone to stop noticing you. Permission for someone to assume your softness is infinite. But nothing in life is infinite. Not patience, not tolerance, not quiet endurance. Eventually, something inside wakes up. For me, that awakening came through a car key, a small object that forced me to see how far I had been pushed past my own boundaries. It wasn't about the vehicle. It wasn't about the rides or the errands or the misuse. It was about the meaning behind it, that I had allowed someone else to rewrite the rules of my life without ever questioning the pen they used. The day I said no, the day I took back what was mine, the day I refused to stay quiet, that day wasn't about revenge. It was about recognition. A recognition of my worth, my voice, my independence. And once a woman recognizes herself again, the world doesn't get to take that away. Not a husband, not his family, not tradition, not entitlement, not silence, nothing. In the weeks after the confrontation, Ian and I walked through a strange path, part rebuilding, part reflection, part quiet understanding. We didn't pretend the damage hadn't happened. We didn't sweep the hurt under a neatly arranged carpet and call it peace. We talked. We listened. We argued, softly and honestly. We apologized. We recalibrated. And slowly, very slowly, we began repositioning ourselves in each other's lives in a way that didn't require me to shrink. I learned something important, that partnership isn't measured by what you provide outside the home, but how you treat the person who stands beside you inside it. He learned that respect isn't a performance reserved for society, but a daily practice reserved for the person who shares your home. He learned that love isn't proven through grand gestures, but through small acts of consideration. And I learned something too, that boundaries are not walls, they are doors. Doors that open when respect enters and close when it leaves. Sometimes people ask me if the entire situation, the fight, the confrontation, the legal warning, the emotional upheaval, was worth it. And my answer is always the same. It wasn't about winning. It was about waking up. Because I was asleep in my own marriage. Asleep behind politeness. Asleep behind compromise. Asleep behind the belief that keeping peace is more important than keeping myself. I needed that moment, that painful, messy, uncomfortable moment, to open my eyes fully. I needed to learn that speaking up doesn't destroy relationships. Silence does. If your partner loves you, your voice won't scare them. It will guide them. It will teach them how to meet you where you are. It will show them how to love you better. And if they don't love you enough to listen, then they were never yours to begin with. My mother's strength taught me the final, most important lesson. A woman becomes dangerous the moment she realizes she doesn't need permission to protect herself. Not permission from her partner. Not permission from society. Not even permission from fear. My mother didn't fight my battles for me. She reminded me I had the right to fight them myself. She gave me the clarity I had lost. She gave me paperwork, yes, but she also gave me something deeper. The courage to stop accepting anything less than respect. And that changed everything. Ian and I aren't perfect today, but our marriage is different. Not because he suddenly transformed into a flawless man, but because I stopped allowing myself to disappear. He learned how to step back. I learned how to step forward. He learned that respect is non-negotiable. I learned that boundaries protect love. They don't damage it. We both learned that silence is not harmony and speaking up is not conflict. Marriage is not about winning. It's about balance. A balance we had lost. A balance we slowly rebuilt. Not through fear, not through threats, not through loud fights, but through truth. Honest truth. And that truth is what saved us. If you're listening to this story right now, and something inside you feels familiar, if you feel your voice shrinking, your heart dimming, your confidence fading behind someone else's choices, then please hear me when I say this. You do not owe anyone your silence, not even the people you love. Your needs matter. Your voice matters. Your dignity matters. And if someone chooses not to see that, teach them. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. Clarity is louder than shouting, calmer than conflict, stronger than fear. And once you find it, you won't lose yourself again. Thank you for listening to my story. And if you made it to the end, just know I'm grateful for your time, your presence, and your heart. Did you like my story? Please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this story of mine travels. In the end, respect isn't something you demand, it's something you refuse to live without.